Welcome to Pathways to Greatness, the show where faith meets focus and potential becomes purpose. I'm your host, Jeff Forrester, mental performance coach, speaker, and believer that greatness begins within. Each episode, we'll uncover the biblical principles, mindset strategies, and daily disciplines that help student athletes, parents, and leaders just like you walk boldly in their calling. Let's step onto the path that leads to true greatness, God's way. Well, on today's show, we have Kristen Woodman. So like her and many, many others, I found her on Instagram in the mental performance algorithm and also the volleyball algorithm. So if anybody scrolled through my Instagram, you would know exactly what's important to me. It's volleyball, mental performance, football, food, puppies. I get some of the puppies and cats, and then Jesus, of course.
Awesome. It's so great to be here. Thank you, Jeff, for inviting me on today.
Yeah, thank you. Well, Kristen, I think you said you had listened to some of the episodes. So before we dive into everything and tell everybody who you are, I like to play a game called Would You Rather just to get the wheels turning. So are you ready?
Sure. Why not? Haven't played this since college, so hopefully it's not the same.
There you go. No, it's not. Okay. So would you rather fail publicly chasing a big vision or succeed quietly playing it safe?
Absolutely fail publicly. It's the best way to learn.
Do you feel like that you've always had that same mindset?
No, I did not have that mindset until I became a Christian. When I became a Christian, I was in a really hard part in my life, and I had a speech teacher give me a sheet of verses, which is funny that we're already diving into this because this is the basis of what my business is built on. But I read a verse, James 1:2-4, and it talks about finding joy in the trials and understanding that, we have to continue to persevere, and persevere must finish its work in you so that you may be complete and not lacking anything. And up to that moment in my life, I really questioned a lot of why my life looked different than a lot of my friends and teammates. I just had so much pain and struggle. And I mean, sports was my way out. It was my escape, almost in an unhealthy way at times. But at that moment, I realized I was asking the wrong question. I was like, why is this happening to me? Where after reading that verse, it was like, okay, anytime that I'm in a trial, I go back to the book of James and I just really ask God, what is the meaning of this pain? How are you using this? What are you transforming in me to use this as something bigger? And my dad was actually in the hospital in, it was like week 3 of his coma from an overdose. And I was not doing great things in my life. I was not making great choices. And I feel like a lot of things were crumbling, and it was a huge turning point in my life. And I'll never forget reading that verse on my walk from my dorm to class and just feeling this overwhelming sense of understanding that I really don't have to be a victim of my pain, but really asking a different question of how God is going to use this. So for me, that moment, it's like I'm okay failing. Failing gives me feedback. Failure really is the best way to go for me to move forward. And failure isn't scary because it's not that I'm actually failing. It's like, what's God teaching me?
So when you ask that new question, I know a lot of people, they read that verse and then they ask themselves that question because they know they should shift. How do you listen? I know I struggle with that sometimes. It's like, it's easy for me to ask the question. I just never shut up and I just keep asking the question. So help us learn some things to do on how to listen when you ask the question.
Do you want it in my personal sense or how I use this exact verse with my athletes?
I mean, whatever you think would resonate. I think a little of both would work.
Okay. So the way that I use this verse, this is the verse, the basis of my foundation. Every single athlete that comes through my program, my program is called the Persevere program for a reason, and it's because of this verse. But a couple of things that I take from this verse, the first one is finding joy in the trials. And so I work with a lot of perfectionists. I've worked with one male athlete, but the majority of the athletes that I work with are female. I think it's just because the coaching space I'm in and everything. But most female athletes and most females in general are perfectionists. And so what I see with perfectionism is we like to control the narrative, and we like to control people's perception of us, which a lot of times prevents a lot of female athletes from pursuing with everything they have, and knowing that there's no guarantee. But a lot of female athletes get stuck of like, what if I do all this and I don't make it? Okay, well, what if you do all of it and do make it? Right. But really the two big things that I take from the verse that I tell athletes is, the first one is finding joy in the struggle. To me, perfectionists see obstacles as a stopping point, that it validates that there's something wrong, that they're not enough. And so the flip side of what I help athletes see is that it's not about a perfect performance. It's about perfecting the process and pursuing perfecting the process, but knowing that we won't, because we're not perfect humans. We fall short, but it doesn't mean that we don't continue to pursue being like Jesus. It doesn't mean that we don't pursue trying to be perfect like him, but yet we're forgiven knowing we won't. And when you translate that into performance, it's really where your focus goes. A lot of times perfectionists really get validated, or what's the other word? They get caught up that the outcome isn't what they want. And I was listening to my Bible app today, and it was in Ecclesiastes. Anyway, haven't had my coffee yet. But it talks about like, we're not ever really going to be perfect, but it's about pursuing it. Anyway, I digress. I'm going to probably have more than one tangent. But what I tell athletes, it's like, you're asking the wrong question, because perfectionists or victims ask, why is this happening to me? Why is the ball keep going out? Why am I not being able to score? Why can't I touch that ball? Or why do I keep missing? And it's like, you're asking the wrong question. We need to shift it to, where in the process do I need to put my focus? And perfectionists, when they go to the process, they want to do they remind themselves of every single step along the way. Where in reality, most athletes, especially the ones that I coach, don't suck at everything. There's not something that every part of the process needs to be coached. It's just a few minute things, right? I coach at Mad Frog, so I coach very high level athletes, and even at a young age. And so they want to control every part of the process, where really it's like, you need to figure out what part of the process you need to focus on, right? So I really help make that shift. And then the other shift that a lot of perfectionists have from this verse is, the work is never done, right? The work is never done. So, but perfectionists really have this never enough mentality, which is there's a beautiful balance of obsession and delusion, and then also leading to burnout. And so what I help them with in this second part is being able to track their progress in the mundane, right? The best athletes in the world do the basics and do the boring things over and over. Why? Because it puts them 0.1% closer to being perfect at the process, knowing that they're always going to fall short. And so, I do this through systems and what I've created with my program. But those are the two big things that I feel like I help athletes the most when it comes to, kind of their mindset.
I love that. And while I was thinking is, as we go through and see, that's just the first question, and here we are 10 minutes into it, is that I want the audience to listen is, if you're not an athlete, or if you don't have athletes, but if you're a parent, if you're a friend, all of these things that Kristen's sharing with us, you can apply to your own life. Because how many of us want to be perfect in everything we do at work? You get an email that you had a typo and you just flip out. That used to be me. Like, I would be devastated. Like, oh my goodness, people saw a typo. And then I sit there and I think, but everybody has typos. And bottom line, it's just a typo. And when you were talking about perfectionism, I've had Coach Jeff Hubner from Palm Beach Atlantic. Do you know him by any chance?
No,
He's awesome. Well, one of the things that he shares is that, and he kind of put it on coaches. So this would be us giving other people feedback, is when people make mistakes, they don't make a mistake because they were 100% wrong with what they did. It's more than likely they only did something wrong about 3%. So like, if you're trying to serve receive, maybe you just turned your arm just the wrong way and it goes out to the left. And he's like, they didn't do it on purpose. So one, why do we treat them like they did it on purpose? And two, why as coaches do we start over at 100% like they've made a complete mistake? So back to what you said is it's not 100% imperfection. It's just a small little part. So he's like, it's my job to find the small little part, congratulate them on doing 97% of it well. What do we do for the little 3%? And so, and we'll get into this later, because to me, it's also, it's the athlete or the person who's a perfectionist. It's also the people that's around them that expect perfection. So if you have somebody that is a perfectionist, and in sports, we expect everybody to do everything perfectly, then you surround them with people with pressure to not make a mistake. It's just a recipe for disaster in my mind.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's a big shift where, you know, I've had a couple athletes this last season that had coaches that were very outcome focused. Pass the ball better. I need that ball in, over and in, versus, you know, something that really challenged me. I have been an assistant the last 4 years. I personally, you know, love being an assistant, and I loved the coach that I worked under for the last 3 years. And I really didn't want to come out of retirement because I love just being able to show up and not have the responsibility. But one of the things that really transformed me, because I've only been doing my business for 2 years. In fact, I think next week is my 2-year anniversary of like officially launching my business. But I want to go back to something that you talked about with like how adults really, you know, they get obsessed with like the little mistakes. And my motto building my business, because before I was a high school biology teacher before, and I have had a heart for teaching since 2nd grade. My teacher, Miss Stanley, really made me want to be a teacher. Loved her. And then when I got into sports, I was like, okay, I love teaching through the ball. And then how much the ball saved my life and changed my life. It's like, I want to be able to mentor through that. And so I was a teacher for 4 years. And then after that, I was like, I got to find another way to educate. Got into corporate fitness and really climbed the ladder with sales. And again, like I found myself wanting to be in a position of teaching. I opened 3 clubs in 18 months and was like, I want to teach people how to sell. I'm top in the company. I obviously, you know, do it well. And I have the top 3 teams in the company. So anyway, but I got out right before COVID and started a functional health training business. And because if I wasn't in education, I was going to be in fitness. So anyway, when I was finding myself trying to do everything perfect in my last business. And I feel like, you know, the way that I structured my business was God's calling, but it was just the wrong seat. And so, you know, getting into mental performance coaching and still being able to, you know, coach the game and give lessons and things like that. This time around, I was like, I'm just going to take messy action. I mean, I'm doing speaking engagements, and the people that hired me are like, do you have business cards? I'm like, no. Why not? Do you have like these little like stands that like promote you? And I'm like, no, I don't. Because why? Like, I'm not going to fill the need until I need to. And when I found myself trying to be perfect in everything, like the automations and the tech side, I'm like, whatever. Like, I'm not going to get obsessed with it, because then I get paralyzed. And so I'm seeing this not only in adults, but athletes. I actually had a conversation with a parent last night. We were voice texting back and forth, because I was like, he's not seeing his daughter, you know, working as hard as she says she wants to. And my first question is, well, is she paralyzed because she feels like she has to do everything at once? And this was me back in 23 when I walked away from or 24 when I walked away from my business. Sorry, 2023. Because I was like, I'm so burnt out. I know what I need to do, but I'm not doing it. And I see this a lot with athletes and a lot of high achieving people that have, you know, they have the long-term vision of where they want to go, but they get caught up in like, where do I start? So I don't start at all. And so my mentality with this business is messy action. I mean, I've had to apologize. I've had to be super transparent about like, well, I don't have that yet, but I'll create it. Right? Like, I'm in the mindset of like, well, I'll learn it right now. I'm not going to learn it until I need it, because then I just get stuck in like the what if. And so anyway, that's something I wanted to touch base on from what you said about, you know, with adults being perfectionists, is like, we're trying to control the outcome before we even know what the outcome actually is. I could create this beautiful system or this beautiful plan, but until I'm putting people through it, I really don't know if it's going to work. So I'm I'm trial by fire all throughout. Like I'm not afraid to tell somebody who's paying me thousands of dollars to be like, we'll see. If I mess up, I'll just refund you. If it's great, cool. I'm going to learn and create it better, So I'm that way with coaching. I'm that way with my parents. I'm that way with my athletes. Like, we're going to learn as we go, because I want to relinquish the control. And I know as long as I stay faithful in the next step, God's going to guide me.
Amen. And in anything in life, what's good for one, so you may think it's perfect when you take one or two athletes through, it's like, this is perfect. They had great. And then all of a sudden, the third athlete takes you completely the other direction. You're like, well, I thought this was perfect. Mm-hmm. Well, it was perfect for those two people, but not this person. And when you were talking, I laughed inside of it's like you'll hear younger people say, well, we're saving up to have a baby. When we have enough money, we'll go ahead and have a baby. I'm like, well, you're never going to have enough money to wait for a baby, because you don't know how much, and it's ever sucking all of your funds out of your and wait till they become teenagers and play club volleyball.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Then you have nothing left, but it's all worth it.
Yeah.
Okay. Question number 2. All right. This is awesome. I love it. So I know this is very similar to the first question, but it's phrased a little differently. So would you rather have fear of failure or wasted potential?
That's a tough one. Fear of failure or wasted potential. From how I teach fear of failure, I'd probably go with fear of failure based on my experience versus wasted potential. The way that I walk through fear of failure is I call it the commit to the flip. And so for me, the way that I structure, the way that I try to get athletes to, obviously I'm working with kids. So I'm like, okay, you haven't been in like major, scenarios of like making an investment or, taking a risk with money, but committing to the flip. Most athletes have tried to flip off a diving board or flip off of something. And so the way that I talk about fear of failure and the way that because it's not about being fearless, it's about being able to work through the fear. And so when I think about it, like you're like, okay, I'm going to try the flip. You see one of your friends doing, you're like, oh, they made it seem so easy. And then to me, I think a backflip's scarier than a front flip because you can't see, right? Which is the ultimate visualization of faith. You can't really see behind you, but you've got to commit to the flip. And so you get up and you step up to the end of the diving board, and then you don't go. You walk off and you're like, okay, someone else go in front of me. And then you get up again, and then you may let someone else go in front of you. And then you get up again and you're like, okay, I'm going to do it. And then you do it, and then you bail even before you even start flipping. And so you do this process over and over. And then you're finally like, you get to a point where you're like, I'm done with this side of fear, right? I'm just going to decide to do it. And then they do it. They may flop, they may over rotate, or they may land it perfectly. But at the end of it, they've gotten feedback of how to make the adjustment. And then the fear is gone. They weren't fearless when they did it. They just pushed through the fear because they knew what was happening on this side of fear. And so when they did it, instantly they got feedback. Okay, I'm getting back out. I go back and I land it again. You're like, that's really not that scary. What was I thinking of? And so this is exactly what I teach my athletes is commit to the flip. You're never fearless when you take that first flip, when you commit to it. But the whole purpose is committing. Why? Because I'm going to instantly get feedback of what I need to do next. And so based on those two, I would rather have fear of failure because I can work through fear, where wasted potential is like, I coulda, shoulda, woulda, and I can't go back and change the past. Where in the midst of fear, I don't have to think that I have to be fearless, but I can work through it.
So it's teaching somebody how to fish in essence, because you're always going to have that fear that bubbles up at some point in your life, and you're helping them learn how to manage through that.
Yeah. It's not about, the thing is like what most athletes or what most adults think is like, what if I fail? Right. But we know what's on this side of inaction or paralyzation or living in fear. we know what's on this side. We don't know when we commit to the flip, what's on the other side. But what if you do fail? Instant feedback. What if I succeed? Still instant feedback because it worked. So either way, I think this is where a lot of people in general get stuck is thinking that because I have fear, there's something wrong. There's a warning sign. Or, I mean, think about pressure. People think, oh, when I feel pressure, it's like, oh, I didn't feel pressure in the last match. Well, the last match you won 25-9, right? There's no pressure. Of course you take risks. But really, it's about being able to recognize, like, I don't want to lose because I do care. I want to move on. I want to win. This is an important match, or this is an important meeting. But it doesn't mean that I can't still take action through the fear.
That's really good. So this goes, and you had mentioned something a little bit about this earlier, is would you rather feel called or qualified?
Called. I feel like God qualifies you through your calling. And I think a lot of athletes have it backwards. They want to know everything before they take the risk. And again, this is where I actually did a series of reels going into Triple Crown this year. And going into our first qualifier is, I feel like God qualifies you through your struggles. God is transforming you through the action and through the messiness and through the trials. So 1,000%, I'd rather be called, because the calling, God's voice really guides your direction. Obviously I had it wrong doing functional health the first time, but I was somewhere in the ballpark of what God wanted me to do. And then now it's like, oh, my calling is real clear. Had I not pursued and stayed in my, 9-to-5 job that I did temporarily before starting this business again, I would have known what my calling was. I still would have been unfulfilled or still questioning, like, is this what you have for me? So,
well, and it goes back to that old saying that when the student is ready, their teacher appears. And to me is, you've been learning all along the way. And when the teacher appears, it's that realization of like, oh, okay, I have been learning all these things all along. Now I just need to start to apply them. And so I know that that's a powerful reminder to us all, athletes, adults, whoever, is just, like you said earlier, messy action just moves you forward. And when you talked about failure, and being called, is that two things. One, I've heard the phrase from operators in the military. It's fail forward and fail fast. You just have to go, just do it and get it over with, and then move on and then learn from that. And then the other phrase that I've heard, the name of the pastor's on the tip of my tongue, but I cannot remember it. I can see his face, but he talked about, God qualifies the called. So it goes back to what you said, is that he doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the call. And it's the process. So once you take that messy action, that's the qualifications that he's asking you to do, which goes back to what you said at the beginning of James 1-2-4, is that you have to have all those. And then Romans, I think it's 3-5-8, I think is another one where it just talks about, hope and endurance. I'm not great at verse memorization, but it just talks about how it's important. You have to have one to build the endurance, and then you have to have another one to build the hope. And then you just continue to layer on top of itself. And then you have greatness that comes about.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I think this is where a lot of athletes need, or even in general, people need the mindset of like, the faster you fail you also have to maintain the perspective of learning. And so many people think, and I'm not going to lie, like, setting goals for me was something that I avoided like the plague, because I felt like my timeline was too short and my goal was way too lofty for the timeline, which meant I was a failure. And that's what my last business was, is like, I also wasn't showing gratitude in the progress that I was making. Like, and so now, especially when you hit a certain point, right? Like 15s, I feel like 16's year is all about, like, you start to really live in the refinement and the mundane, and also the training, where I feel like leading up to that, you see like leaps and bounds of, progress from the beginning to end in club season, where, I was telling my 15s this year, like after this year, you've got to really hone in and learn how to, one, identify what part of your game is being exposed, because it's not every part of your game, right? It might be, explosiveness to your right, explosiveness to your left. It could be, your right angle versus your left angle. It could be a cut shot to four, whatever it is. So you've got to really, I feel like where a lot of athletes and people in general live is like being more curious about why the outcome isn't happening, right? And sometimes it's being real with yourself of like, I'm really not giving everything that I am. This season we qualified super early, and I was really excited because we had about a month off between our first qualifier and our second qualifier. And I was like, cool, we can really hone in blocking. We can get really like good at shots, like, things that actually a lot of 16-year-olds really start to hone in. I was like, yes, a mini development season in the middle of like current season. And I was so pumped. But, for me, one, I think I failed painting the vision for the team, but also I think that I failed painting the vision for each individual, but I also think that I was challenging athletes in a way that maybe they just weren't equipped to understand, because it came down to where I was calling my assistant every single night on our way home from practice, because I have an hour commute and he has about 40 minutes. And I'm just like, okay, I'm looking at myself, I'm self-reflecting, I'm doing all these things, but nothing is changing. And so I finally had a meeting with my team, and I was like, I need you guys to be transparent and vulnerable, because right now, and I was vulnerable myself, and I was like, look, I'm really struggling to figure out how to help you guys help yourself, because I'm a proponent, and I think a lot of us in our generation and older, we're very intrinsically motivated. And so I'm just not a coach that wants to be a jerk. I don't want to be a jerk to get you motivated. I don't want to threaten. I don't want to, every single error makes a mistake, because I'm coaching a lot of athletes to flip that kind of pressure into a lot of different things. And I was like, look, what do you guys see? On average, rate your focus and your effort. And nobody rated themselves above a 7. Like, in fact, it was like 6, 7 was the average. And I was like, okay, so whose responsibility is that, right? I'm all about controllables: energy, attitude, effort, mindset, and communication. Those are things that are within your circle of control. And so I told them, I was like, next practice, you guys have to set a standard of what you're going to hold yourself to. And I know it's very different in club, because that's more program driven, but I'm all about it. And what me and my assistant brought to the table was, we got exposed that pressure was exposing who we were and what my athletes were thinking about themselves. They were not being great teammates. And so they came back the next practice, and theirs was 9-10. So it was a short phrase that they came back and said 9-10. And 9-10 meant lock back into focus and effort. And then we as a coaching staff really shifted the focus on performance and outcome to character. And we did John Gordon's Hard Hat Award. And I did it, the book, because one of my pillars is we before me. And so the Hard Hat Award, or the children's book, comes out to that acronym. And so each each practice, coach and I would decide what that character trait was going to be. It could be high fives, it could be celebration, it could be encouragement, whatever. And then each water break, the girls would vote on who was doing that the best. And it completely, so their standard of 9-10 and me taking the focus off of winning to character and to who we were when we were being tested, who we were when the enemy was trying to infiltrate us, is Hard Hat. And it completely transformed our season. It completely transformed our postseason. And because we had Show Me in Salt Lake City, that like pretty close together, and they were 2 of the hardest tournaments in the country. And to me, it was like, character is continuing to be exposed. These girls are equipped. They were phenomenal athletes, amazing young women. And I had them at 14s as an assistant, and I came out of retirement to coach them because I loved every single one of them. And it transformed our season. And so to me, it changed and shifted how I recruited. I'm recruiting great people, obviously talented, right? I'm competing in the open division in 17s this upcoming season. So obviously we have to have talent, but talent isn't everything, because if you have talent with a crappy attitude, you're not met with growth. If you have talent and great families and great human beings, I can take them and turn them into something great. So like God really challenged me this season to be in that curious mindset, to not only transform me, but how can I impact deeper? Like each one of my girls, where do you want this ball to take you? How do you want God to use this? And so anyway, like it was just such a like challenging but rewarding season. And I think a lot of coaches really, especially, and I'm sure Orlando is just as competitive, but North Texas, it is so outcome based. It is so like, how many trophies are you getting? How many national championships do you have? Or, you know, there were times where I was met this season with like, okay, I could make this lineup and lose, or I could keep this lineup and win, but I'm noticing some character things that I'm being challenged with. And so at the end of the day, like that's a hard thing, because it's like, well, winning is also my reputation. It's Nat Frog's reputation. And we recruit in the middle of qualifying season for our next teams. So it's important that we also are developing our, you know, accolades and things. So it was just crazy how God worked, but also how, when I was able to shift the athletes from outcome based to effort based or focus based or controllable, and then character, how it just blossomed into something so beautiful. And then also being real. Like I cried with my team. I ate crow. Like there were a couple times where I'm like, guys, I'm really sorry. I should have just walked away instead of saying what I said. And I think there's something so human about that perfectionists and this world doesn't want to see they want to hold that. They're afraid to let that side out. And, I think it really gave me a lot of courage in being, not only admitting failure, but being okay with being like, I don't know, but we're going to figure it out together, you know?
Yeah. And it's so important in what you had shared. So thank you for sharing all of that, is the importance of who people will follow, meaning they're going to emulate whoever's in that position. So you dictate the culture of that team, you and your assistant coach, or when you had a head coach, because without, you know, the culture comes from the top down, and you have to live it. You have to believe it. And the fact that you are willing to admit it gives the other people permission to do the same thing. Is that, well, if Coach Kristen's going to say that and admit her wrong, that I can, because, you know, I know where it's at. And it's so important in this day and age. And you're absolutely right. As you look at winning percentages, everybody looks at winning percentages. At what cost, though? Are you allowing poor character to be rewarded in the vein of winning? And then, you know, people will talk about, well, we have a standard. Well, what is your standard? Where is it? I'm like, well, we have a standard. Where is it? Like, have you written it down? Do you have defined words that lay out your standard that you can then go to? Because without a map, and I say, hey, I want to go to Dallas, I kind of have an idea of where I want to go, but along the way, it's going to take me a lot longer, and I'm going to make a lot of mistakes, versus if I knew go here, then turn here, then go there, that will get me where I need to go. And so many people just fail to write down their standards. I like to, you know, have them pick 3 to 5 words that they just live by. So when things are tough, they can go back to the words. So like for me, my values are integrity, health, discipline, family. And then the first one is Christ-likeness, which everything goes up underneath that. And so I know if I'm off on if I'm making decisions not based on those areas, they're not a right decision for me.
Yeah. I read a book called Every Moment Matters, and it's up there. But anyway, it really helped me figure out what my 4 pillars were. And my 4 pillars are competitive.
I was quick on the mute button on that one.
Yeah, it's okay. Competitive, discipline, fun, and we before me. It used to be we over me, but when I read the book, I was like, it's kind of the same thing. And the question is who do you want to remain when pressure hits? Like, the other thing is, like, how do we set a standard when we don't really know our own standard as coaches, or we don't understand who we are? Like, a lot of athletes are externally looking for validation or externally looking for guidance. And so they're lost, right? They're driven by feelings. They're driven by good or bad. And to me, knowing those 4 pillars, if you don't fit them, you're not going to like me, because I'm going to hold you to a standard of, like, I want you to be competitive, right? I'm 37 years old and I still want to beat you. I don't care, because it's who I am. And being competitive, when you can internally flip the switch, no matter where you're at, whether it's queens or butterfly or competing against who you were yesterday, coaches can take, like, the sky is the limit for you, even beyond your careers as an athlete. Like, when I think about being competitive, I remember when I got flown to my corporate retreat, and I was like, oh, it's because I'm being groomed and I'm going to be the next GM. No, I was there because I won an award, right? Like, I had no idea. I was top in the company, had no idea. And my my team, or, the people that I worked with that were there, they didn't really know either. They were like, why is she here? She's not even a GM. And famous words of, Mean Girls, like, she doesn't even go here, right? Like, but looking at, like, the competitive side, like, I want that to be part of who you are, or that you've got it and I bring it out. Disciplined. To me, if you're disciplined, I don't have to worry about, there is something selfless about discipline. And I'm not going to lie, like, discipline is my word of the year this year when it comes to, like, the sides of the business that I don't enjoy doing. But I've always been disciplined in areas as an athlete. So I'm trying to make that a whole thing, like what you talked about, and fun. I love to have fun. Working hard, getting your tail kicked, like almost wanting to throw up in a workout, to 6-on-6, it's all fun. It's all fun. And then we before me, and that encompasses the faith side of who do you want to become through this journey? Because let's be honest, not a lot of us are going pro, very minimal, even very fewer are going to college. But how do you want this game to transform you? And who do you want to become when you're tested? Because I feel like that's where a lot of parents and a lot of people get it wrong, is they think when their athlete is struggling, I need to come scoop them up. No, let's have a discussion about what's being exposed under fire. And, I'll be honest, as an athlete, like, I probably wasn't the nicest when I was under pressure, because to me, losing meant I wasn't gaining status. It was really ugly. God's really challenged me in ways to think about who I was as an athlete when I was young. But because I wanted to control the narrative, I didn't want people to find out about my home life or, my insecurities. And so losing really made me insecure. But how many athletes would know that? How many athletes would say, when they become mean or quiet or fearful, would say, well, it's because I'm worried about being rejected. I'm worried about what's going to happen at home. I'm actually worried about, like, not making it, not reaching my goals. Like, that's some deep stuff. Like, think about the conversation you'd have with your kid, or think about the conversation you'd have with your spouse or your mentor at work. If you were like, hey, I'm an avoidant. I'm avoiding because I actually feel resistant, knowing that pushing through, committing to the flip actually is going to probably be something really successful, that breakthrough. And so it's interesting, because I have these conversations with my athletes now. It takes a lot of, like, maneuvering and self-awareness of, like, they're probably like, I don't ever think that deep. Well, let's think about it, because I feel like God's prompting this by testing who you are, by, knowing where your enemy is going to attack you, knowing your weaknesses on your mindset side. I did a study last fall called When Godly People Do Ungodly Things. And part of it, 2 sections of that is like knowing Satan, knowing the enemy. And so I prayed and prayed and prayed. And I was like, God, reveal to me how the enemy is going to get through to me this season. Reveal to me. And he sure enough did. And it sure enough was right. But I have that same conversation with my athletes. What's your enemy, right? Is your enemy negative talk? Is your enemy fear of failure? And then when is the enemy going to attack the most? And how do we equip you to battle the enemy or to push through that fear? And so I get really deep. I get really honest, and I get, I use my own personal testimony and my own stories and my own failures to connect with athletes because I was right there along with them.
Well, and you said a ton, which is extremely powerful. And when you're talking about knowing yourself, I think one of the biggest skills that is avoided is self-awareness. I had a conversation with a group of dads. I have a call that I'm on with a group of dads once a week. And one of the gentlemen was like, I'm just not good at self-awareness. Well, to me, that means you're avoiding being self-aware for what you're going to uncover. And so I feel like that you have so much that you have to understand is that you start little with someone like you that creates a safe space. And this is why I'm a firm believer. Everybody should have a coach or a therapist that they can work through a lot of these things because it's safe. As an athlete, you probably would have never wanted to go to your coach to admit any of this because you're like, they're going to hold it over my head. Now I'm going to be the problem child that can't work through all of these things. And so I'm going to get benched. Same thing in the corporate world. Like you never would go to your boss. At least I would never go to my boss and say, hey, I'm scared to do this. I don't know how to do that because I know that's going to come up on a year in review. So having someone that can help you navigate through that is so important. There's another, and I was scrolling through my phone because I'd forgotten the name of the book, but it's by Napoleon Hill called Outwitting the Devil. If you've never listened to it, it was one that while he was alive, he never published. And his family, after, I think it was like 75 years after he had died, finally published it because they were saying is that it just revealed so much, just not only about the devil, but about the church and how the devil works and how the devil spins things to trap people. And so it's really interesting if you get a chance, I listened to it. If you get a chance to listen to it, it's just interesting of the things that Napoleon Hill saw of traits of the devil. And you're like, well, that's just so real now. And he wrote this like in the 1920s. And so it's just really interesting how you go through all of that. And so it's like you said, it's like when you study your opponent, you're more aware of their faults and what they do than they are because you're watching that. So when you watch film, when we have conversations with others, are we willing to hear that real truth? And then if you're standing in front of the mirror, are you willing to give yourself feedback that you know you need to hear, but you're afraid to say it? So you can start by just having that conversation with yourself in the mirror all by yourself and not have, at least that's somewhat of a safe space. It's scary.
It is. John Maxwell, I saw a clip of one of his speeches and he was like, you actually don't become self-aware from yourself. You become self-aware from other people, saying things like, hey, you hurt my feelings, or, hey, that really inspired me, and I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah. Like when we seek out, right. When I'm working with athletes or, Lord knows I've been in therapy, those same things, but it's being bold enough to ask, like, where am I falling short? Right? Anytime that I fail, anytime that my team loses, where do I need to assist? Where do I need to help them? And so much of the world today is the opposite, right? When the team loses, the coach failed, right? Or someone else did it. And it's like, just think if we all self-reflected and asked the one question, like, what was exposed? What was exposed and where do I need to go grow? Because that's a reflection system that I've created for my athletes that like, we get real curious and it's really challenged me to do the same thing. Because what this does, and if they don't know, being vulnerable enough to ask, like, hey coach, like this week in my journal, I couldn't answer the why something went off this week. I noticed that my hitting was off, but I don't really know why. Okay. Right. Let's look at all areas of your life. All right. Maybe it's school stress, or, you know, you didn't get a lot of sleep, or, oh, wait, hold on, you underfueled. Okay, cool. Right. Like those are things that we look at. We don't just look at practice, because as an athlete or as a human, when we're high performers and we're, you know, trying to meet deadlines and goals, and we have to operate at such a high level all the time, everything is contributing to how we perform. And, you know, I think that's where the power of the vulnerability aspect that I really challenge athletes, because I transitioned my business from one-on-one to small group coaching this year. And I was super scared. I was like, what little 8th grader is going to want to be on a group with 5 or 6 other athletes saying, yeah, well, it got really real. One of my athletes, she lives in Miami area. And she was like, I actually get really mad at my team, because when they're not doing well, it makes me look bad. And I was like, holy smokes, this little 7th grader just said that. And then it opened up, and another 8th grader was like, yeah. And I knew from this other athlete, I was like, I knew that this was something that, like, I related with her, because she would get really angry when her team wouldn't do well, because it reflected on her. And it made her open up and be aware of, like, oh my gosh, I do the same thing, but I also am really hateful to them. And I say, you know, and she gave me some examples of what she would say. And I'm like, this is what we need. This is what athletes and parents and this world needs, is like this raw vulnerability of transparency. And there were pivotal moments for them to both admit that out loud. One, like, holy smokes, would I be judged for that? But obviously, like you said, we're in a safe space. But the other thing is how I've seen over the last 4 or 5 weeks, them going into school season and tryouts and all this, like them stepping up and being better people. It's so awesome. But there's so much that's broken, I feel like, with where our focus is, and that's driven by athletes, which also drives clubs and businesses to be so performance-based, that really what high performers, or what sports and high performing athletes breed, are resilient humans, time management, teammates, you know, selfless. And we're losing so much of that right now, with it being all about winning, because it's not about the outcome. It's about who we become when we reach the goal. And anyway, sorry, just got off on a tangent with that one.
Oh no,
I feel like that's just where we're losing.
I can go forever on this topic. And when you were talking about it, I've had this thought, or just my belief, even through my 22-year corporate career, is the higher you go up, the least amount of feedback you receive. So as a player, or if you're frontline in sales, you get tons of feedback, tons of development. We're going to send you to selling schools. We're going to give you all these fun things, spend tons of money on you. And then all of the managers or the coaches just keep doing your thing. You just figure it out. Where to me is when you were talking about that conversation within a group, I feel like, especially now, since winning is so important and there is such a move away from character development because of the pressure of winning, is where's the safe place for coaches to come together and to communicate and to ask, well, how do you do? Because if you think about it, how much feedback do you get on your coaching performance after a tournament? Probably none.
None.
Especially
None.
if you win. If you win the whole thing, you probably get nothing. If you lose, maybe. But you sit there, and I just remember we would have conversations when I was a manager, middle manager, about how do you have conversations? What does that look like? How can you change your report to give feedback? But then when I got promoted above that, I got nothing, like no development, no anything. And so I feel like the higher you go, like we said before, is that's dictating the culture. Why are they the least ones that focus on themselves, one, because they're busy and they're doing a ton of things, but to prioritize that level of, hey, what do I do with an organization that we need to win? We need to excel to continue to grow our program, but we really want to stay focused in character, and having those conversations, like, then how do we do that? Because a lot of people, I had a COO one time, he's like, we're really good at coming up with great ideas. We're really bad at executing them. And so, which is true, because you'll sit around and come up with amazing ideas. And then, like you said before, nobody's willing to take the messy action because you have to just constantly perfect the situation and check this and dot this I and cross this T. Just do it. Just start and then figure it out as you go.
Well, and I think a lot of times when we aren't getting that feedback, we feel like we have to reinvent the wheel. So my goal last year was to invest in my coaching. So I went to a gold medal square clinic, and what was so incredibly eye-opening of these high-level coaches that are teaching this is how boring their practices are. Like, one, I forget his name, he led it. I could see his face. Oh my God. He coached Love B. Austin. And I think his first name's Chris. I'm having a brain fart. But anyway, he was like, we do the same 10 drills all season long. And I was like, what? And so I think where a lot of coaches struggle is that, like, they're like, we have to do all these fancy things and all this. And I'm like, no, we're going to do the same thing and build on it. And so, obviously I think at the beginning, like when you're finding your footing as a coach, you try some different drills and you're like, I like this, I don't like this, or maybe it's a little too high level. Like I adopted a few of the drills that I really liked, and I was like, okay, I like this, but it's a little too, not high level, but it's a little, it's not, that would be a 16, 17 drill or college or pro. Right. And so I found that, like, the same drills, they get really good at them and they look forward to them and they find out how to master them. And so I think, a lot of coaches really struggle without that feedback, reinventing the wheel. And it's really like, no, go back to the basics, go back to what works. And I think that that was something that really challenged me this season, was going back to the basics, because I would get adopted in doing all these cool things. And I've even adopted it in my lessons. We do the same thing. If you're with me on serve receive and we're doing passing and defense, we're going to do the same things. Why? Because it works, right? There's no need for me to do all these fancy things, right? I have my tools and I have my little, things that I have that that bring awareness to the body for some of these young athletes, but it's the same across the board. And I think that's where, I was talking with a coach last week, because I'm adopting a few coaches into my program that I'm mentoring on the mental game that want to, do it. And one of the conversations was, well, you do a lot of the same things that this other coach that I hired did. And I was like, what? None of us are reinventing the wheel. I'm not reinventing the wheel of mental performance coaching. I'm not. I'm putting my own emphasis and my own style and my own voice to it, right? I'm more faith-based than this other coach. So you're going to hear more faith-based throughout my mentorship and my teaching and how I tie it back to Jesus and the Bible. But it's the same skills. It really is. And so I think that's where a lot of parents get caught up in all this fancy crap too, that it's like, well, this isn't good for the highlight reel for my daughter's Instagram that's 12 years old. And it's like, well, that's not what works. That's not what your kid needs. And so you're adding this whole other component that puts pressure on coaches to do fancy things and get away from the basics, which then in turn reinforces athletes that they need to be doing the next thing. And it's like, well, the best athletes in the world, like, you're going to do butterfly the rest of your career. It's okay. You're going to get really good at butterfly. I tell all my athletes that you're always going to serve. You're always going to hit. And so I think that's another thing with the mindset is, like, it challenges you to live in the basic, but we don't live in the basic because it's like we feel like we've already mastered it. Well, you've mastered it, but have you mastered it to 79% and then 80% and then 81%? And it's living in that 1% that I think people think is too boring. But that's really where athletes get really good at self-confidence, is being able to be like, I know how to control my growth. Wherever I put my focus is wherever I grow. But we're missing the point of being able to reflect back on, well, how was my intention and did it work? Yes. Repeat the process. So they really lose, in general, I think parents and people just lose sight of the boring stuff, what works, and as leaders, sometimes, like, one of the moms that I work with her, I've been working with her daughter for 2 years. She's high up in marketing for, is 7-Eleven the one that has the gulp? No.
Yep. They have a big gulp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's what, in my session summary email, it was talking about go back to the basics. And she emailed me back and she goes, I literally took this to my marketing meeting and we went back to what works. And I was like, see, like, and she was like, thank you so much. Like, this really put things into perspective of us trying to, like, keep up with the Joneses, when really what worked for us to be a great company and what sets us apart is this Slurpee. No, anyway.
Yep.
And so it was just cool. It was just pretty cool to know that, of like, these skills also apply to everything that we do.
Oh, for sure.
It's just asking the right questions of where am I being challenged this year?
Like, if
might not be your.
Well, I was going to say, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but it goes back to one of the reels, then messages you had on serve receive. So for those who don't know volleyball, serve receive is probably one of the most important things. Is you need to be able to receive the serve and to start your offense. And we've all seen it. If you can't serve receive, you have no chance. But if you can serve receive, like the good teams, like, man, they're scrappy. They don't ever let anything hit, because it all starts with serve receive, which is the most boring probably part of a practice of just over and over and over. But the ones that do it well, they win the trophies, and then you can start to perfect other elements. And so that's in life, is if you can perfect those basic things. And what's wonderful about the Bible, and I'm so glad that you're faith-based, because I am as well, is the two basic things that God told us to do. Love him with all your heart, mind, and spirit, and love your neighbor. Like, you do those two things, everything else falls into place. And so if you can focus on getting better at those two things daily, your life's going to be unbelievable. I have no doubt about that. And it's not overly complicated. It's just two things that we need to do.
Right. And I think that, the way that we put an emphasis on winning and how it makes our kids look, or how it makes us look as athletes, that's self-serving. And so, when I get back to character, when we talk about we before me, the best athletes are the best athletes in the world. And I forget the coach that said it. She was like, I want to put an athlete that's the best and most talented next to the worst one in the gym, because it's going to reveal her character, right? It's instantly going to show me, is she going to help her, or is she going to feel like you're making me look worse? Is it about me, or is it about them? And so, it's a lot of rewiring, but it's a lot, like, when I say I changed the way that I recruited this year, hours and hours of phone calls about families, talking to other families that I, really trust and respect their opinion, and they've been in the world, a little bit, because they're in this age group. And it's like, I really did turn down families, because I'm like, I don't think that you will like me with what standard I hold your athlete to as a person. And I'll when I look back on my career of athletes and families that haven't had great experiences with me, it's because I hold the athlete and the family to a standard of character of how you're going to treat people. How you're going to treat people when things don't go your way. And I mean, Andy Jackson in the, NCAA tournament last season got pulled. She wasn't performing well. I mean, and they panned to her a lot on the sidelines with the camera talking about her. And I'll never forget, like, I go back to that often of, like, in that moment, I can't imagine what she was feeling. I failed my team. I'm one of the best middles in the country, and I'm benched because I'm not doing my job. But every time, she was being a wonderful teammate. She was being the biggest cheerleader to the middle that replaced her. I could see her face, but I don't remember her name. My assistant's going to text me and be like, Kristen, because he's a huge Nebraska fan. But in that moment, she's being the best teammate. Now, after the game, that's a time for her to be, self-reflecting and frustrated with herself. But in that moment, she still remained who she is, which is a great teammate. when things weren't going her way. And I think, what I want to do and how I feel like God has called me to do is I have been so bold in that proclamation of standing firm in my ground of like, you will not be, and I think I said this in a huddle, and pardon my language, I said, you will not be a shitty human being right now. You will not be. That is not what we've worked on. That is not what we're going to do. That is not who we are as a team. And that is not who I recruited. Because at the end of the day, this medal can be thrown in the trash and no one cares. No one cares I won a national title 2 seasons ago. No one cares. But what matters is who I'm going to become and how I'm going to impact others in the future. And I just hold firm to that. And I think so many more coaches need help. So many more parents need to shift that of like, and I tell them like, there are athletes that leave our club and it's like, well, I mean, do you feel like this coach is going to get the best out of you? Do you feel like the coach has the right mentality or pillars or standards that are going to get the most out of you? The same reason I didn't take some athletes. You don't fit my system. You don't fit my pillars. And to save us both headaches, let's stop chasing the status of the team and start worrying about who I'm putting my athlete around. Is this person going to get the best out of my kid? And I think that's where I really, really struggle in this region.
Yeah. Well, and what you're doing, that's going to help the world. Like you said, the world doesn't care if you won 6 national championships. They just don't care if you won MVP. They care of what kind of person are you. And if what you're doing now is shaping people, is there is a responsibility to uphold a standard that you've set. There will be repercussions in life if you don't uphold to a level of standards that we set, because the world has them. Wherever you go and you work, there's, whether they communicate them clearly or not, that's one thing. But I want like my kids and our family to be known as someone who they are, whether they're winning, losing, whether they're at home, at work. And it's not easy. It's definitely not easy. And you're going to lose a lot of friends. A lot of people are going to cut you out of their life. And that's okay. God closes doors and removes people to make room for other people. And, but there's so many times, like you said, in this competitive world, not just in volleyball, but in life, is that people are willing to live in the gray area. And we know what Jesus says about being middle ground. Like he's going to spit you out. He literally says, I'm going to throw you up if you're lukewarm. I mean, think about taking a big swig of warm, like room temperature milk. It's not a good decision.
No,
it's
absolutely not.
It's like Anchorman talks about. He's like, milk was a bad choice.
Oh my gosh. My husband and I are such movie quotes. So that's hilarious. Yeah. I think the other big challenge that, I think what, I don't look for conflict, but I'm not afraid to address when there's misalignment or miscommunication. And I think that, something that I really help athletes do as well is, one, manage conflict, right? Whether it's we're role playing because they want to have a meeting with their coach, or they there's high school volleyball is a different kind of drama, right? So a lot of conversations I'm having with my athletes inside my program right now is like, I was messaging a senior yesterday back and forth, and she was like, how do I have this conversation with a teammate? I feel like she's not caring, and it's coming across, she kind of listed all these things out. And I said, well, my first question is, how is your relationship with this teammate? Right? Like, how can you expect to hold someone accountable when you don't have a relationship with them, especially when you're on equal ground? But the other thing too is like, the next question is, what do you want them to know? Right? Where's your heart? Right? And a lot of athletes and adults don't have great conflict resolution skills because, again, why is this happening to me? Or why are you doing this to my daughter? And it's very defensive. And so I feel like God has challenged me in ways, and I've kind of probably established my reputation of like, if you don't want the truth, don't go ask Kristen. If you want the truth, ask Kristen. And it's not that I deliver it in a hateful way. It's that I deliver it in a very honest, but, graceful way. And I mean, I've parents, coaches, athletes, like they really are like, how do I manage this? I've had parents that are like, how do I help my kid? Or, I want the coach to know this. And I'm like, well, it's not your place. We've got to equip your kid to be able to have this conversation with the coach, or we've got to be able to equip your kid to be able to manage, leadership or accountability within the team. Because parents, again, you want to do everything for them. And I truly firmly believe that why athletes and families struggle so much now is because sports is not going to evolve in a way that parents can come and save your athlete from adversity. It's just not going to do that. Life just isn't going to do that. And they've carried the load for their kid in so many ways, but they will never be able to carry the load of adversity when it matters most. And they're just not going to be able to. And so the conflict resolution is something that is very prevalent right now in the season that my athletes are in, and it's school season, because there's a lot of cattiness, there's a lot of drama, but there is a lot of fear and like, well, what if I step up and they talk crap about me? And I'm like, well, my first question is, are these people you want in your circle? The answer is always no. And because if an athlete is recognizing poor character, they're recognizing that like they're not in my circle. They're mature enough for that. The other big one is checking your expectations of other human beings. A lot of times we are looking at people in a way of, well, I would never do that. Well, you're right. They're not you. They're not you. I had an athlete I've worked with the last year of like, gets up and works out. She's super disciplined. And then she gets mad at her teammates because they aren't the same way. And I'm like, but we can't expect people to be who we are and do what we do. And that's the same mentality I want my athletes to have about a coach, or the parents about a coach, about their decisions. We're coming into these experiences with, that's not how I would do it. Okay, well, you're not the coach. You're not in a position to do it. But just because you would do it differently doesn't mean that the way I'm doing it is wrong. Or I'm holding your kid to a standard that you don't hold in your household and it ruffles your feathers, instead of thinking, I'm grateful that they're being challenged in this area. Instead, they want to rescue them and say, well, that's not how I do it. You don't need to be doing that to my kid. And it's like, well, then coach your own kid. Like really, I have said that, like, here's an application, go apply and be a coach next year, if this is how you want to control. And so a lot of other conversations is like, one athlete was frustrated. I made a post a couple days ago. Her athlete was frustrated about how her coach was giving feedback. And I was like, you have expectations of how your coach is, how you want her to be. You want her to be this different person, and she's not. And so when we get to a level of acceptance, which it's taken a lot of healing for me to say that, is that I'm just going to be in a place of acceptance. It doesn't mean that I need to change them. It means, how do I respond differently? If I'm not getting what I want from here, then I maybe, like, if like a lot of parents want the coach to coach the mental game and they get mad and frustrated. I'm like, well, if they're not giving it to you, then go get a coach that does. Add or supplement so that your athlete's becoming complete, right? Or in a boss setting, my boss doesn't really give me feedback. My husband, when we moved down here, oh, my AirPods are going to die. My husband was like, my supervisor doesn't really give me praise. And so he had a conversation with her. She goes, no news is good news. That's just how I roll. Where his previous supervisor always gave him praise. Okay, we're back. So my husband really had a hard time because he's like, I don't ever hear feedback. He's gotten more accolades and more awards under this supervisor than his previous supervisor. So obviously what he's doing is working. But he really had to come to terms with himself that, like, okay, I feel like I'm not getting what I need from her, so therefore there's something wrong with me, right? We're not getting that verbal or external validation. So what's wrong with me? Am I doing it right? Where instead, when she said no news is good news, it's like, oh, okay. So I'm really only going to hear from her when I need to change something, or when I need to adapt, or when I might be doing something wrong, which, some people don't like. They want that praise. But is he going to change her? No. So a lot of times we get caught up in, well, she's not doing this, or they're not doing this for me. And it creates so much unnecessary drama that, I mean, that's mainly, I feel like, why a lot of coaches are leaving. You know, a lot of coaches are leaving because parents are expecting the coach to conform to each athlete, where a coach's responsibility is to the team, right? It's to the team. You know, my libero is setting for varsity, and she was really upset. And I was like, no, cool, go rock it. Learn another position. It makes you a better athlete. Oh, okay. You know, like, I mean, I don't know. I think that we also have to really, from a mindset perspective, when we think about expectations, we also have to check our expectations of other people, right? My husband isn't going to do things the way that I would do them, but I also have to appreciate in the way that he does it. And I think that's where coaches are struggling most with kids and parents, is like, parents are giving their opinion about something instead of just making the athlete functional. I don't know. I'm not the coach, right? Go ask your coach. My parents being ignorant of the game and making me fight my own battles is probably one of the best things they could have ever done for me as a human. And I feel like that's why I'm in business, because so many athletes don't have the skill set to be outward thinkers or out of the box thinkers of problem solving around obstacles of what we would do or how we would do it or how my parents would do it. And it's like, okay, cool. I don't want to be surrounded by people who are just like me. I'm not going to grow. But parents have prioritized comfort zone over growth. And, you know, I just, like, something as simple as, like, get your own water bottle. Like, you know, talking about nutrition, it's your responsibility to put your food for your tournament on the grocery list, not your parents. Your parents do grocery shop because they pay for it, but it's not their responsibility to know what you need to be eating. It's your responsibility. And I think so many parents aren't doing that for their kids, those little things. Well, you didn't put on the list, you don't get it. No, let me go pick it up on our way at 6 a.m. on our way to the tournament. No, you forget it. Sorry. I'm not going to get it for you. You know, and there's something about those little things that really, I think, builds resilience and problem solving and adaptation that kids just aren't getting anymore. Majority.
And it's setting expectations on both sides. It's making sure that the coach is communicating proper expectations. And then, like you said, is when you're interviewing a club or you're interviewing something, is the coach, it sounds like you do this, is challenging the parents of what is your expectations of me? And then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, that's not how I roll. So this isn't the best decision for you to be a part of this team. And it's any time in life where I've been frustrated, it's because of the lack of communication and setting proper expectations every time. Even if it's just me of going into a situation, I didn't set clear expectations, and then I was let down because in my mind, I had these lofty expectations. And when they weren't met, even though they had never been communicated, I act like a baby. So
I think that's what most of us women do, is we have our to-do list, but we don't communicate it, and we get mad that no one else knows our to-do list. So
yeah,
I think you just
and I know this paints a broad brush, but in the majority in the coaching world, coaches are not good communicators. And
it's crazy.
Girls and boys, men and women, doesn't matter the sport. There's just no communication. And all of a sudden you've got somebody sitting on the bench and there's been no discussion of why. And so the poor child is going, I don't know what I did wrong. All of a sudden I'm not playing anymore. And then there's never a discussion. And then as a parent, it's like, well, you need to go ask, but they're afraid to ask. And so it's this whole thing where all it takes is 1 minute of, hey, I didn't see you do X, Y, and Z. I need to see if I put somebody else in, would we have a better outcome? It's still difficult, but then you at least know what you've done or not done to then, like you said before, a failure of having that immediate feedback.
Well, and I think also where I think coaches can really grow better is it sucks to be on the bench. It sucks to be pulled when you're not performing well. It's embarrassing. Like, let's be honest. This is what athletes are feeling. And at what point did we forget what that feels like? I mean, this is why I left education, because I feel like administrators forget what it's like to be in the classroom. As coaches, the best thing that we can do is remember that it sucks to work really hard and not get a lot of playing time, to only play when, I mean, I had an athlete this year that sometimes didn't play at the last day of qualifiers because it just wasn't there yet. My goal was to develop her to get there and to gain that trust from her. But at the beginning, it had to be established. And so there was reminding of like, hey, like, I'm noticing that you kind of lost confidence and you stopped being aggressive. Or sometimes I can't sub out my bro. I don't have a switch. I can't put my middle in for my bro and serve receive if we're struggling. So sometimes, or I don't have the configuration of where I can pull someone else back. And so the subbing is what I do instead of calling a timeout. And I'll say that, hey, I subbed you so I could freeze the server, and this is all that I could do without calling a timeout. And I'll say that as they're coming off. But I think a lot of coaches really, they're too much in their ego about, oh my gosh, you're not playing well. You're not doing what I want you to do. I firmly believe that athletes don't want to suck at things. I firmly believe that. I don't think that any of us want to do anything wrong. But as coaches, we have a responsibility to also ask, why is the process breaking down? Right? And it's, why are we looking so good in practice, but we're not looking good in games? Maybe because I'm a fear-based coach. Because I'm saying if you don't do X, then you've got consequences. You miss a serve, you run. But then I'm mad that your serve isn't hard enough. Like, what's the kid supposed to do? So this has really challenged me to, like you said, kind of in the beginning, to reward the effort. Hey, I'm really proud that you stayed aggressive after that error. Like, swing away, right? Because to me, aggressive is a mentality. And a lot of coaches aren't like that. They're not. And when I watch Division I volleyball, it's 24-24. Those hitters are swinging like it's 0-0. So where am I going to take my notes from? The best. You're going to continue to swing regardless of what it is. Why? Because that's what works. That's how you score. You don't score playing safe. You don't score, you can be strategic and, placement, but your mindset has to remain aggressive and confident. And I think that's where a lot of coaches can do better. You don't have to be a mental performance coach to coach the mental game. You just have to shift what you're rewarding. I'm rewarding aggression. I'm rewarding communication. I'm rewarding the things that lead to perfecting the process that lead to a desired outcome. So where do I put my emphasis?
Yep. Or do you reward bad behavior by not pulling them out, or, doing those things of just, there's a great book called Whale Done. I don't know if you've ever read it. Super short. It's about the trainers at SeaWorld. I know it's controversial, about training killer whales, about, you don't beat a killer whale with a stick because they'll eat you. You take them out of the tank and put them in the side because they love to play. So you take them out of play and you put them away. And so the book's written by a former killer whale trainer. So it's really good. It's easy. Mm-hmm. It's a quick read, but it's a powerful one. Well, Kristen, I know we've gone a long time, and I know you're a very busy person, and it seems like you and I are on the same wavelength and could have a 3-hour conversation. Yes. But I want to save you the time of having to go through all that with me. What would be some parting words you'd like to leave the audience?
I think I'll go back to just what, my main mission is to help athletes is remember that you don't have to be perfect. Perfection isn't the goal. Pursuing perfection perfecting the process is the goal. Be immersed in growing, not immersed in the outcome. Because when we are faithful in the next step that God calls us to do, we might not get exactly what we think we want, but I feel like in the journey of that faith forward is going to transform your mindset to see God's calling for you. And he's going to qualify you in the next step that you take, as long as you're focused more on the process, because the process is where the transformation happens, not the outcome. The outcome is just, again, you're committing to the flip and you're getting feedback that what I'm doing is working, or feedback of where do I need to grow. So I just encourage you guys to really make that shift of stop pursuing perfection and start pursuing perfecting the process. Because that's really where you're gonna, the sky's the limit for you.
I love that. And how can people find and follow you?
I am on Instagram, TikTok. It's the Mental Volleyball Coach. And obviously on Facebook. Facebook is Kristen Lee Woodman, but you can go like, follow, share, whatever, just connect with me. I'd love to know if you guys have any questions, or I'm always open for feedback because again, without feedback, I can't do what I do. So that's how you can connect with me.
That's awesome. Well, hang tight for a minute. Thank you. It was a great conversation. I've got 2 pages of notes. It was really good. I appreciate you, and everything that you said resonated and hit home with me. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
So ladies and gentlemen, Kristen Woodman.